Hi everyone, my name is Heiko. I wear different hats. So during daytime, I am a specialist solution architect for AI and machine learning at AWS. But because that was not enough, I also thought, there's a huge gap between the NLP research community and businesses who want to use the advances of natural language processing. So that's why I founded NLP London, to get them together in one room in London on meetups and get talking. I also founded my own consulting firm, and through that I actually managed to work on a project with GPT-3, which is what I want to talk to you about today. But first of all, who here in this room has heard of GPT-3 before? Okay. And who has worked with it, like maybe played within the playground or tried it out in a production environment? Okay, quite few people. So let me first go quickly through what is GPT-3. There we go. It's a large language model. It has 175 billion parameters. So these are parameters that can be trained if you train the model. So these are your weights and biases in your neural network. And it generates AI written text. And in some cases, it is actually quite good. It has the potential to be practically indistinguishable from human written sentences. And it's a transformer model that is trained on this task called causal language modeling. And causal language modeling is, to be honest, just a fancy term for next word prediction. So you take a sequence of words, you put it into the model, and the model tries to predict what is the next likely word in there. So in a sense, it's like autocomplete almost, autocomplete on steroids. Apart from, like, if you call GPT-3 autocomplete, that's basically the same as calling your computer a fancy calculator. It's not technically wrong, but it kind of misses the point, because as we hopefully going to see, GPT-3 is quite powerful when it comes to generating text. So some of the examples that have been around since GPT-3 was released in, I believe, May 2020, is this one I really like. So whenever you read like legalese, so a contract or something in legal language, GPT-3 can actually read and understand this legal text and basically summarize it in plain English. It also can do movie guessing. So you basically type in a little bit of a description for a movie. It's hard to read, I think, here, but in this example it says, what's a movie where the badass guy kills everyone because they killed his dog? And the answer is John Wick. It also can create code. It's been trained on generating code. So you can describe a layout, and with the right prompt, GPT-3 will then create the HTML code that it needs, or the CSS code, in order to create what you described, in this case, a button that looks like a watermelon. And it can be used to actually generate news articles. So The Guardian, in a interesting piece in 2020, used GPT-3 to write an article about GPT-3. So you can read this article. It's, if you wouldn't know, it is actually quite distinguishable from human written text. So how do you use GPT-3? Ideally, I wanted to show a demo today on how to do that by going live into the system. but we will have to do with screenshots, unfortunately, today. But the way you use it is in different scenarios. You give it either a few examples, so the model will learn what you want it to do, or you just give it one example. Sometimes you can even give it just an instruction and not give any examples, and it produces quite good output. And the way to do that, and I encourage everyone, I have the link at the end of the presentation to go to the GPT playground and just play around with the model. I think the first, I don't know how many tokens are free, so you can just play around with it without being charged. And after a while, again, maybe 10,000 tokens or so, I don't know what the limit is at the moment. They will actually charge you for using the model, but play around with it. It is really interesting. So the first way, as I mentioned, is you can give GPT-3 a few examples together with a task, and then we give it a list of foods. We want the GPT-3 model to tell us basically what is the origination of the country of origin for that type of food. We give it a few examples, and we leave the last prompt empty. So for fish and chips, we don't actually provide the country, and then just tell GPT-3 to do that for us, and then it will correctly identify that it is from England. This one is a one-shot learning example. So you basically give it some text, and you want the GPT-3 model to extract the airport codes from that text. When it says, I want to fly from Los Angeles to Miami, it will extract LAX and MIA. And if, like myself, I want to fly from London to Belgrade, it will extract LHR and BEG, which I think is correct. You can also do, as I mentioned, zero-shot learning. So that is, you basically give it no examples. Instead, you just tell it what to do. So in this case, we have an email coming in. Dear Mark, I want to check if you'd like to invest in my company. Minimum investment, $100,000. Please let me know if you'd be interested in that. Kind regards, John. And then we tell just GPT-3, write an email that kindly declines the offer. And if you run that, it actually comes back with a little bit in the way here, but it says, it writes this email. Hello, John. Thank you for reaching out. Unfortunately, I'm not interested in your company at this time. I wish you all the best for future endeavors. Sincerely, Mark. So that, I would say is quite indistinguishable from humans. Like, this is something that a human could have written. Now, coming back to the project that I mentioned. So Ashoka is an NGO that was founded in 1980, and it's the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs. So young people usually who want to create enterprises that do good in the world. And these social entrepreneurs, they're always encouraged to lay out their strategy, which can be sometimes challenging or intimidating. So Ashoka wanted to create a strategy bot. And this strategy bot, basically what we wanted to achieve with this strategy bot is for the AI model to basically write a strategy paper that details the problem that the social entrepreneur wants to solve, and then even includes some ideas on how to create systemic change. So once a social entrepreneur does a project in, say, Nigeria, that project will have some immediate results. But how can you go about scaling this project and do systemic change within the country? That's what we want an AI model to write for us. So Ashoka went ahead and tried GPT-3 with few-shot learning. So they have already a good data set with social projects that entrepreneurs have done in the past and have written about. So basically what they did is they took some of the strategy papers that they had in their database, around 5,000 examples. They put a few of those into GPT-3 and used few-shot learning, just like we saw earlier, but with a little bit more text in it. And the results were actually already quite promising. So what GPT-3 does is, again, as we saw earlier, it picks up the sentiment or the intent of what you wanted to do. So it actually understood, oh, okay, you want me to write, some kind of paper that, lays out a strategy. And the results from few-shot learning were already quite promising. However, they were just not quite good enough for production. So GPT-3, as I mentioned earlier, was launched in summer of 2020. And then December last year, so almost a year ago, they opened up GPT-3 for fine-tuning. And fine-tuning is different from few-shot learning in the sense that when you do few-shot learning, you give GPT-3 a few examples, you don't actually change the underlying model. The underlying model is frozen, the weights will not change. It will just, from the input, try and understand what it is you want it to do and try to replicate that. Fine-tuning is different in the sense that you're now actually going to train the model. GPT-3 is a pre-trained model, but with just a few examples, and in our case we saw just a few hundred examples, were good enough to use transfer learning, so use the capabilities of GPT-3 and transfer that into the domain in which we want GPT-3 to specialize in. So, and in that case, that was writing strategy papers. So the instructions how to do that, it's pretty straightforward. I have, again, the links at the end of the presentation, but OpenAI, who created GPT-3, they have pretty good instructions on how you need to prepare your data set and submit it to the API in order to fine-tune the model. So they ask you to have a example prompt, and then an example completion. So that's the ideal generated text for a given prompt. So all we needed to do then is to take these examples that Ashoka had already in their database. Remember, it was around 5,000 examples, and just take a few hundred of those, create some prompts for those, and then put in the strategy papers that they had in their database as the ideal generated text. So this is one of the example prompts that we then created. We basically had a data set with several columns, one with a very short summary of the idea, another one with the idea itself, and then another column with the whole strategy. We did some feature engineering, so we combined the first two columns, took the first two sentences of the first column and some sentences of the second column to produce this prompt that basically gives an idea of the strategy. We then also append to every prompt, because it is recommended by the OpenAI API documentation, we append a fixed sentence at the end of every prompt, write an essay that describes how this could be achieved, to trigger basically GPT-3 and tell it, okay, once you see this sentence, that is when we want you to start writing the strategy paper. The fine-tuning, again, super simple. Once you have your data set in a JSON lines file, JSON-L file, you can just use the API and submit the training job. And in our case, it took about trying to remember, 4 to 5 hours, and then the model has been trained. Once your model is trained, the way to experiment with it and see if it's actually good enough, or if you want to do further training, you can go back into the GPT-3 playground. They have different models in here, and once you start training and fine-tuning your own models, they will become available in the playground as well. So you can just choose the one that you just trained in order to play with it. And obviously, I'm not going to expect you to read this all out by myself, but you will be able to see this in the slides once they are published, and also in the blog post that I have created for this project. But basically, we have here a prompt in the beginning: futurepreneurs inspire students at school and universities to start their own initiatives. The goal for the organization is to integrate entrepreneurship in the education system in Nigeria. Write an essay that describes how this could be achieved. Remember, this is the fixed sentence that we put at the end of every prompt when we train the model. Write an essay that describes how this could be achieved. So this means now GPT-3 knows, okay, I gotta, take this first sentence over here and basically write a strategy paper about this. And if you, go through it, it is actually quite sophisticated. As always, as many speakers before me have mentioned, this is not in order to replace the social entrepreneurs or replace their task to write strategy papers. This ideally should be used in conjunction with these social entrepreneurs. So they can use this tool in order to get some ideas how to write the strategy paper, maybe even take some of the ideas GPT-3 comes up with in its own strategy and basically refine it, you reuse it. That is, again, going back to the analogy with the calculator. You wouldn't expect an accountant nowadays to do their job without a calculator or computer. And that is where I see the future going as well with these generative AIs, is you can use them as a tool just like you're using a calculator. That's pretty much it. I promised some additional materials, so the GPT-3 Playground is available to everyone. I highly encourage you to play around with that. You find some ideas about pricing and preparing the data set, as well as the documentation for the API to fine-tune, and then the text completion API as well. If you're interested in reading more about what I just spoke about, there's a blog post that I wrote on Towards Data Science. And finally, if you would like to get in touch, these are some of the links: NLP London, AIML Consulting, and my profile on LinkedIn. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Okay, the first question. First of all, thanks for the presentation. I would like to ask. I played around with GPT-3, and I tried to do this exactly, like to give it one thought or zero thought or several examples. And so, with my goal, let's say, was to hypothetically build a conversational bot that could behave as a human support. My concern, and on the same moment, the amazing part of the thing was that, for example, I gave, let's say, I want a company named Ganti, and I don't know, I added some assets on this story, and this is a conversational API named whatever, John. And so after I start asking the thing questions, and I say, for example, what is your company named after? And it says, oh, Mahatma Gandhi, blah, 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 and so on, things that I didn't tell it to say. The first concern was, okay, this thing can say whatever that is not true. For example, I asked, okay, how can I do this in your platform? And given the fact that I gave some sort of what my software is about, it started giving random information that sounded like accurate, but it's a nonsense in terms of giving me the help link and stuff like this. And just to keep it short, that was the first concern. The second is, if you ask the same thing, how to cook sushi, it may give you an answer or not. And that was the biggest concern, like, okay, they pre-trained like this model and all this like amazing thing with billions and stuff and billion of features, and I don't know, I'm not so amused. And the second part of the question is that the Open API got a lot of criticism, about the model, the business model, because it's supposed to be open. Practically, you cannot train this model. You cannot like get a pre-trained model like in your own infrastructure, neither in the cloud. It doesn't work. And the thing is, for example, to build a conversational API, you have to keep in mind that as long as the conversation runs, there is no session. The session is that you are giving all the conversation again and again, and you are getting charged for all tokens all over again. Okay, it makes sense like that the model expects like this input this time and stuff, but it's practically, I wouldn't put like my multi-million idea based on this thing that is charging me whatever. So sorry for the like long concern, but how can I really trust and utilize this thing instead of more conventional like approaches?
Okay, there's many aspects to this. So the first one I would refer back to is, again, I wouldn't necessarily use this model autonomously in order to replace humans. I see it more as a model that you can use as a tool with humans. So, you know, in this case, I wouldn't have an autonomous chatbot running on this software. Instead, I would have it produce some outputs, maybe some phrases that an actual human could use in chat interactions with their customers. Does that make sense?
Quite. Still, it doesn't answer how can I prevent it of giving answers that I didn't instruct it to do so. I mean, I like the conversational part of the thing, but I don't want it. And I actually played a bit more with that. And this makes it even more expensive. The more context you give, the more tokens it burns. And I try to say, don't speak about this topic, that topic. And after I realized that I cannot cover all the topics, so I cannot tell it not to say things.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Well, in that case, you could also use the fine-tuning, right? So you could basically train it in a way with enough examples to encourage the model to speak about certain topics rather than others. And then coming back to your second point about the model being not open, you can't download it. There are actually quite a few very good open source examples, open source models that are quite good in terms of performance, that come very close to GPT-3's performance. And I believe open source is the way forward with these kind of models. So the way Big Science has trained the Blue model, or Facebook has come out this summer with the OPT model, these models can be studied much better. And I do believe next year when we get together here again, there will be open source models that you can train much easier and give it these like tasks of not talking about certain topics much easier than GPT-3.
Thank you.
Another question? Here. Hi, I have a quite similar question regarding the reproducibility of the model. Let's say I'm building a bot that I want to GPT to generate poems. So I decide, okay, write me a haiku poem about love forever. And I give it I have the list of poems, and I write haiku poem about that, and I write the poem. Write haiku about that, write poem, and then I say write haiku poem again, some topic, and in most cases it works well. But I have developed similar app in before, but the results were not consistent. So once it generated well haiku, next time it would generate some kind of poem that is not in the structure that I want. How do you handle how do you force the GPT-3 to follow certain form? Is it the fine-tuning the best approach, or if I have like 10 examples, or is it just good enough to generate prompt?
Yeah. As with many things in data science, you have to experiment. If prompts are usually like many examples in a prompt is probably the best way you can go without going fine-tuning. That being said, we have seen extraordinary results with fine-tuning. So if you just want to try it out, give it a few, maybe 100 examples. I would be surprised if you wouldn't see a very good uptick in performance in that.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Any other question? There's another one.
Maybe a simple one. Older models, language models, and chatbots models were prone to kind of get biased, and the stories of chatbots becoming, well, I won't go into that. Do you know by chance how OpenAI is actually making aware that this is not happening with GPT-3?
No, I'm. As we already discussed, unfortunately, GPT-3 is a closed model, and I don't work at OpenAI, so I have no idea how they're doing that. My best guess would be they have between you submitting your prompts and the model generating some output, there might be some prompt engineering in between. So they tweak maybe your prompt in order to get the desired results, and they might also, on the way back, once the model has generated some text, there might be some post-processing after that as well. But we will never know because, again, it's a closed model, unfortunately.
So can I use it as like text to speech to text? Like if I need to do a quick email now to respond to something, so I can just say a couple of words in my phone and telling him, please send email about this and this because I want to say this and that's it. So then it generates an email or a message, whatever, and send it to whoever I want it to.
It's interesting you would say that because OpenAI also published a model called Whisper earlier this year, a few months ago, and that one is actually open source. You can download that and play around with it. And what you could do then is a pipeline of so first of all, let me talk what Whisper is. Whisper is a automatic speech recognition service. So you could build a pipeline where you speak into your phone, you have Whisper transcribe your speech into text, and then feed that text into GPT-3, and whatever comes back is your output. So by connecting these different models together in a pipeline, you should be able to achieve that, yeah.
So to send an email because I'm driving or I have no time, I have a very short break, like a 2-minute break, and I need to do a proper email.
The Whisper model is very good, actually, in terms of automatic speech recognition. It even is very good with dialects. So I had a Scottish colleague trying out Whisper, and the results were astonishing, actually.
But still in English?
No. Whisper covers, I think, more than 200 languages.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Whether
you.
GPT-3 then understands those languages, again, we don't know, because GPT-3 was trained in private as well, so we don't know the training data set. We don't know how good it would speak Serbian, for example. Again, I would point to open source model like Bloom, which has been actually trained on 40 different languages. It's the world's largest open multilingual text generation model. And that one, together with that, I think you would achieve that, yes.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, and I don't see any hands raised, I would thank Heiko for this. It was amazing and interesting for her to learn about those things. And yeah,
Thanks.